Life has a peculiar way of orchestrating encounters that can change destinies in the blink of an eye. On a sunlit Los Angeles afternoon, when the city's pulse beat with its usual rhythm of ambition and dreams, two vastly different worlds collided on the sidewalk of a busy street. A Hollywood legend and a homeless man crossed paths, changing both their lives forever. The California sun cast long shadows across the polished storefronts of Beverly Hills, where luxury cars purred past designer boutiques and high-end restaurants. It was the kind of day where dreams seemed tangible, floating in the warm breeze like autumn leaves. Yet for some, those dreams remained painfully out of reach, scattered among the city's unforgiving concrete canyons. Among the steady stream of pedestrians, a familiar figure moved with purposeful strides. His weathered face and commanding presence turned heads, though he seemed oblivious to the attention. Clint Eastwood, the man who had defined an era of American cinema, was simply going about his day, perhaps contemplating his next project or enjoying a rare moment of solitude in a city that rarely offered such luxury. Little did he know that fate had scheduled an appointment with destiny that afternoon, one that would remind him of life's surprising ability to teach profound lessons in the most unexpected moments. The scene was set for an encounter that would challenge perceptions, touch hearts, and prove that sometimes the smallest requests can lead to the most meaningful exchanges. The contrast between the two men couldn't have been more striking. Clint Eastwood, at 94, carried himself with the same commanding presence that had made him a silver screen icon. His journey from a Depression-era child to one of Hollywood's most respected figures was itself a testament to the American dream. Born in San Francisco during the Great Depression, he had known lean times, watching his father move from job to job along the West Coast. Perhaps it was these early experiences that kept him grounded despite his meteoric rise to fame. Behind the steely gaze that had intimidated countless on-screen villains lay a depth of understanding that came from decades of observing human nature. His weathered features told stories of countless films, both in front of and behind the camera, but they also spoke of wisdom earned through years of real-life experiences. Despite his enormous success, Eastwood had never forgotten his humble beginnings, maintaining a reputation for treating everyone he met with genuine respect. On this particular day, he wore simple clothing, a light jacket, comfortable pants, and well-worn shoes, a far cry from the glamorous attire often associated with Hollywood royalty. His unassuming demeanor made him somehow both noticeable and approachable, a rare combination for someone of his stature. Across the street, Kevin Bradley stood in the shadow of a building, his entire world contained in a worn backpack and a cardboard sign. 3 weeks behind a dumpster had left their mark on his once-pressed clothes, now wrinkled and stained with the evidence of rough living. His face, though marked by exhaustion and worry, still held traces of the successful contractor he had been just 6 months ago. The recession had hit his small construction business hard, and a series of unfortunate events had created a perfect storm that swept away everything he had built over 20 years. First came the canceled contracts, then the mounting bills, and finally, the eviction notice that had forced him onto the streets. 2 days without a proper meal had left him lightheaded, his hands trembling slightly as he clutched his cardboard sign. Kevin's eyes, though tired, still held a spark of determination. He wasn't looking for pity, just a chance. A single dollar that might buy him a cup of coffee and a moment of normalcy in a world that had turned upside down. His wedding ring, the last valuable possession he refused to part with, gleamed dully on his finger, a reminder of better days and the family he was struggling to rebuild connections with. The contrast between these two men extended beyond their current circumstances. While Eastwood had transformed his early hardships into stepping stones toward success, Kevin's path had taken an unexpected detour from stability to survival. Yet there was something in both men's eyes that spoke of resilience, a shared quality that transcended their vastly different situations. Kevin's story was familiar in a city where dreams often crashed against the harsh rocks of reality. Just a year ago, he had been overseeing construction projects, proudly watching as buildings rose from empty lots under his supervision. His crew had respected him, and his clients had praised his attention to detail. The photos in his wallet, now creased and worn, showed smiling faces at project completions and family celebrations, memories that seemed to belong to another lifetime. The economic downturn had been ruthless, sweeping away not just his business but his sense of identity. Each day on the streets had taught him harsh lessons about invisibility, how people's eyes would slide past him as if he were part of the urban landscape, no more noteworthy than a parking meter or newspaper stand. Yet he maintained his dignity, keeping himself as clean as possible using public restrooms, and never allowing himself to give in to despair. As he watched Eastwood approach, Kevin felt the familiar internal struggle, the battle between pride and necessity, between dignity and survival. His father's words echoed in his mind. A man's character isn't measured by how many times he falls, but by how many times he gets back up. With this thought stealing his resolve, he made a decision that would prove to be pivotal in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The moment of truth arrived as Clint Eastwood's path brought him within a few feet of where Kevin stood. With trembling hands and a dry throat, Kevin took a deep breath and stepped forward. The simple act of approaching someone of Eastwood's stature made his heart race, but desperation had a way of overwhelming even the strongest inhibitions. "Excuse me, sir," Kevin managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I hate to bother you, but—" He paused, the words catching in his throat. The request for a single dollar seemed simultaneously too small and too monumental. Eastwood stopped, turning to face Kevin with that characteristic steady gaze. Unlike many celebrities who might hurry past or pretend not to notice, there was something in his stance that suggested genuine attention. He didn't recoil or look away, instead studying Kevin's face with the same intensity he brought to his iconic roles. The busy street seemed to fade away as these two men stood facing each other. Passers-by slowed their pace, some recognizing the famous actor, others simply intrigued by the unusual tableau. The moment hung in the air like a held breath, heavy with possibility. "I just need $1, Kevin finally said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Just enough for a cup of coffee." He held his ground, fighting the urge to look away from Eastwood's penetrating stare. What happened next caught Kevin completely off guard. Instead of reaching for his wallet or walking away, Eastwood gestured to a nearby cafe. "Sit down," he said, his voice carrying that familiar gravelly tone that had commanded attention in countless films. "Let's talk." The invitation was delivered with such casual authority that Kevin found himself moving toward the cafe before he'd even processed what was happening. The simple metal chairs and small round table became the stage for an unexpected encounter that would prove to be far more significant than any dollar bill could represent. As they settled into their seats, the cafe's other patrons tried their best to appear nonchalant while stealing glances at the unusual pair. The waitress approached with a mixture of confusion and curiosity, her notepad ready but her eyes darting between the Hollywood legend and his disheveled companion. "Coffee for both of us," Eastwood told the waitress, his tone leaving no room for discussion. As she hurried away, he turned his full attention to Kevin, creating a space of unexpected intimacy amid the bustling cafe. "Tell me your story," he said simply, leaning back in his chair with the patience of someone who had heard countless tales throughout his life. There was something in his manner that made Kevin feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in months. Kevin's hands wrapped around the warm coffee cup that arrived moments later, drawing comfort from its familiar warmth. "I built homes," he began, his voice growing stronger with each word. 20 years of watching dreams take shape in wood and concrete. Had my own company, 15 employees, a family." He paused, collecting his thoughts. Then the recession hit, and everything just crumbled. Eastwood listened intently, his expression thoughtful. The story wasn't new. He'd seen America weather numerous economic storms throughout his lifetime, but the raw honesty in Kevin's voice commanded attention. "I used to drive past homeless people," Kevin continued, a bitter smile crossing his face. "Never thought I'd be one of them. It's amazing how quickly it all can slip away. 3 months of bad luck, that's all it took. Now I'm sleeping behind a dumpster and my kids," his voice cracked slightly, "they don't even know where I am." The actor's eyes narrowed slightly, not in judgment but in contemplation. "What's the next chapter of your story?" he asked, the question catching Kevin off guard. It wasn't about the past anymore. Eastwood was pushing him to look forward. Kevin blinked, taken aback by the directness of the question. For weeks, he'd been focused solely on survival, on making it through each day. The idea of a next chapter seemed almost laughable, yet something in Eastwood's steady gaze demanded serious consideration. "I still know how to build," Kevin said slowly, as if discovering the words as he spoke them. "My hands haven't forgotten. The skills are still there even if the business is gone. I just need a chance to start over." Eastwood nodded, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That's what I wanted to hear," he said. "Sometimes life isn't about holding good cards, but about playing a poor hand well." The words carried the weight of personal experience, of lessons learned through decades of ups and downs. The conversation shifted from the abstract to the practical, with Eastwood asking pointed questions about Kevin's experience, his certifications, and his immediate needs. Each query seemed to serve a specific purpose, though Kevin couldn't yet see the full picture forming. "You know," Eastwood said, leaning forward slightly, "I've been around long enough to know that success isn't about where you are, but where you're headed. Sometimes the worst moments in life are just the setup for something better." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small notebook, writing something down with deliberate care. "I know some people in construction, good people who value skill and hard work over circumstances." He tore out the page and slid it across the table. "There's a number here. Call it tomorrow morning, tell them Clint sent you. They're always looking for experienced supervisors on their projects." Kevin stared at the paper, his hands trembling slightly as he picked it up. It wasn't just a phone number. It was a lifeline, a chance to climb back from the edge. "I don't know how to thank you," he began, but Eastwood waved off his gratitude. "Thank me by showing up," he said firmly, "by remembering that everyone needs a hand up sometimes. And when you're back on your feet, pass it on." He pulled out his wallet, extracting several bills. "This is for a room tonight, a decent meal, and some clean clothes. Tomorrow, you start writing that next chapter we talked about." As they stood to leave, Eastwood placed a hand on Kevin's shoulder. "You came asking for $1, he said, that familiar half-smile returning. "But what you really needed was someone to remind you of who you are. Sometimes that's worth more than any amount of money." Kevin watched as the legendary actor walked away, disappearing into the flow of pedestrian traffic. The piece of paper in his hand felt like it weighed nothing and everything at the same time. He had asked for $1 but received something far more valuable: hope, and a reminder that even in a city as vast and impersonal as Los Angeles, moments of genuine human connection could still change everything. If the story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can keep spreading stories that remind us of the power of compassion and second chances.